Israel will send a delegation to Cairo, negotiations for a comprehensive agreement. Based on another report coming from the Wall Street Journal citing Arab officials, that the delegation would be leaving as part of discussions to close a deal. To close a deal, not to just talk about it. An American source at CNN that after the release of Aidan Alexander, discussions on a comprehensive agreement would begin. Now, Trump had hoped that this deal would be agreed upon his arrival to the region, but that didn't happen. It didn't happen because Benjamin Netanyahu was insisting that there won't be a deal, and he wants to continue this war. He clearly did not want to adhere to all of the demands of the Palestinian resistance, and he wasn't happy with all of the situation. However, now Israel is forced to send this delegation to Doha and to Cairo after pressure from the United States. And this means that Benjamin Netanyahu is slowly getting the message that I need to have some action done so that we can calm the situation down, reduce the tensions between us and the administration. He sent Ron Dermer. It didn't work with Ron Dermer. Ron Dermer came back with many statements that, well, Netanyahu is actually frustrated, annoyed, and surprised. Why is he annoyed, frustrated, and surprised? Because the United States is talking with Hamas directly, because they're reaching this deal without consulting us, and because they're going to a deal with Iran that will not necessarily stop Iran from enriching uranium. And there were also reports and quotes about Benjamin Netanyahu saying that any country that has any sort of deals behind Israel or without any sort of coordination with Israel actually harms Israel. That's something very problematic. Clearly, Netanyahu, he had a speech, he had a statement today, very short video, in which he said, I had a conversation with Donald Trump. Both of us agree that we need to release all of the prisoners of war and we need to also achieve victory. However, that can't hide all of the problems that are happening. And as a matter of fact, some people in Israel are actually celebrating this. They are celebrating this because they're saying at least one of them was released. Benjamin Netanyahu clearly failed, but we have one of the prisoners of war back now. At least it's better than nothing. So there was one report in the Israeli website Ynet saying that the deal over Netanyahu's head may turn out to be a blessing. Now, in this report, they're saying that the release of Aidan Alexander is an independent American move. It's an insult to the state of Israel, but it also holds a benefit. And that benefit, according to the report, is that it can push for a broader deal with the efforts of Steve Witkoff, even with the talk about all of the solutions in the day after. But one thing that they mentioned that is a key problem for Benjamin Netanyahu is the fact that this deal could also end in Hamas surviving in the Gaza Strip with American support. That means Israel is preparing for a scenario inside of the Gaza Strip where Hamas and the United States would have some sort of an understanding. There would be an administration that is not technically Hamas, but agreed upon by Hamas with the Hamas blessings. The armed wing of Hamas and the other Palestinian resistance movements, it will not be touched. They will not be touched because they're non-negotiable and they're tied with the Israeli occupation. So deal with the occupation, then try and talk about the resistance, occupation, oppression, right of return, all of that. But in Israel, they're trying to prepare the public opinion for the fact that, look, we're going to have Hamas here. Now, that's not something new. Everyone knows that. In Israel, everyone knows that they can't defeat Hamas. And many people know, if not the majority, that Benjamin Netanyahu is saying that he wants to defeat Hamas just as an impossible excuse to continue the war. Israel said it wants to eliminate Hamas multiple times previously. It failed miserably. And Benjamin Netanyahu was the man who was coordinating with Hamas for all of his terms. Hundreds of millions were going into the Gaza Strip, billions even. Everything was going fine. But he thought that Hamas would be bribed by getting the money and basically making it hush money, and that's it, we'll control Gaza and no problem. Become like another puppet regime who gets money and goes quiet. But the Hamas and other Palestinian movements, by the way, it's not their nature. They're liberation movements looking for the overall liberation of the Palestinian people and the historical rights of the Palestinian people. And now this report, alongside other reports in Israel, are coming to give the Israelis a reality check. Wake up, you fools. You have a prime minister who is fooling you, deceiving you, and you're going to have to reach a deal, and Hamas will have to remain there, whether we like it or not. And guess what? The United States will be coordinating with them. Why? Because they're coordinating with them now. The United States is having talks with Hamas directly. They've clearly been having talks for a very long time, and they're continuing to have talks. They're having deals. Again, despite what you may think about this gesture coming from Hamas, without guaranteed returns, or at least undeclared. Do you know what I mean? Because something can be undeclared, and we've decided to keep it right between, behind curtains for the meantime. Although it's coming simultaneously with all of this talk about a bigger deal, Israel confirming that there's a lot of pressure against it. Now, the talks are happening. The delegation is in Doha and in Qatar. And the interesting thing about this delegation is the fact that these delegations went to close a deal. The delegations went to close a deal and not to just go and negotiate. Because previously Benjamin Netanyahu was sending certain delegations to the Doha and Egypt and Cairo, but not with the intention of closing, because he did not give them a mandate. He did not give them the power to close the deal. But now in Israel, they're saying that he's sending them to close a deal. And if a deal gets closed, that means Netanyahu would submit to the pressure of Donald Trump. But if not, that means the problems will continue. Now, Hamas, they had a statement. Hamas made a statement in relation to this release, and they also said that there are advanced talks with the United States. So these advanced talks are coming simultaneously with the release of Aidan Alexander, and they're continuing after. So this was one of the reports that was published here in one of the Palestinian websites, advanced negotiations with the United States regarding a ceasefire in Gaza. According to this report, Hamas leader told Al Jazeera that direct negotiations with the United States administration have entered an advanced stage aimed at achieving an immediate ceasefire in the Gaza Strip. It's been going on for days now, and they're discussing the mechanisms of the entry of humanitarian aid and a complete cessation of the military operations. So the priority is to, of course, lift the siege, give the relief for the people. But they're also talking about ending the war completely. And in relation to the mechanisms, by the way, there have been plenty of talks about aid going into the Gaza Strip and the United States having certain private companies dealing with the aid that's going into the Gaza Strip, the initial points, they will have points to provide relief for the 2.4, 2.5 million inside of the Gaza Strip. Initially, it will provide immediate relief for 300,000, and then it will expand to all of the other people inside of the Gaza Strip. And that's according to the Witkoff document. Now, the Witkoff document, if you're not familiar with it, it was released in a couple of locations. One of them was Yediot Ahronot and other Palestinian networks too. He was talking about the Gaza Humanitarian Fund, saying that this mechanism, this relief, this initial relief for the Gaza Strip, it will include the establishment of 4 distribution centers throughout the Gaza Strip, each of which will serve up to 300,000 people in the first phase, with plans to expand later to serve up to 2 million people. I was about to read that as starve for some reason, because that's what we're used to, people starving Gaza. But finally, there's more talk from the United States about actually serving the people of Gaza rather than starving them. The document stated that the distribution would take place through secure channels without any Israeli military presence, and under the direct supervision of independent security and safety teams. The materials, food, parcels, hygiene supplies, medicine, and water would be distributed solely according to the need and without any discrimination. Plans are underway to provide boxes to Palestinian families at a cost of $65 per box, 50 complete family meals. Each person will receive a meal containing 1,750 calories for $1.31. I have a couple of problems with this. My biggest problem with that is that people on this planet, they have the power to dictate how many calories enter a person's body. People have the power to starve children and other people to death. Israel has been starving people to death, using starvation as a tool of war. And guess what? No coverage on earth would be enough to cover the horrors that they've conducted in Gaza. That's apart from the genocide and infanticide and every other side you can think of that they've conducted in Gaza. Every abhorrent act of savagery and barbarism, supported by even bigger barbaric maniacs supporting them. But there's a very big problem in a world that has people who can dictate how many calories each individual eats, and that's when they decide to give them food. That shouldn't be the case. That's not normal. No one should have the right to dictate who eats and who doesn't eat. What kind of world do we live in? Now, going back to the statement of Witkoff. Witkoff said without Israeli presence and independent security and safety teams. That's the thing that's Israel going to try and work around. Why? Because from an Israeli perspective, they don't want aid to go into Hamas, right? Everything goes to Hamas eventually. And, they steal aid and they hide it in the tunnels and Dude, when aid goes in, we see the people eating. When aid goes into the Gaza Strip, we see people actually eating, getting the boxes, and guess what? Some of them actually have videos and they put it on YouTube and online and whatever. It isn't going in the tunnels. And guess what Israel does? It goes and bombs warehouses and places where there's food storage, restaurants. Flour massacres to levels where we have the flour massacre, many of them, right? Now, this document coming from Witkoff is evidence that, and the talks and confirmations coming from Hamas, is evidence that they're now looking at the steps before the actual implementation. Netanyahu could be still delaying all of this so that he doesn't appear to be a person who submits to the will of the United States president. Israel first, we will do it on even if on our own. He now takes pride by saying that, well, look, previously Biden told me don't go into Rafah, and then I went into Rafah. All of that talk, despite the fact that wherever he went into the Gaza Strip, his terrorist child killers were getting a beating. And their biggest ambushes are happening in the past week by the Palestinian resistance. Every few days, another similar to the previous one, by the way. So you're talking about amateur, stupid genocide soldiers going there, not knowing what to do, roaming around. Oh, excuse me, some of them were commanders. There was a battalion commander and a deputy commander of a division who were killed a few days ago in Shuja'iyya, or severely wounded, according to Israel. So not all of them are like amateurs. But you get the message. These people are going there for the sake of Benjamin Netanyahu when his son is bathing in Miami and in other parts of the world. And they're getting a beating. They're getting a beating from the Palestinian resistance. But Netanyahu, of course, wants to portray it to the Israeli cult that follows him that, no, I'm not going to listen. I'm not going to listen to Trump. And guess what? Even if Trump wants to dictate the time, I'm not really going to play ball with that, and he's going to try and stretch it up until the last second. Now, to be fair, to be totally fair with what I'm seeing, and that's my opinion here, nothing is clear. There is nothing that we can say is a very hopeful sign that something is going to work. The only points are, well, the Hamas decided to release a man based on certain developments. If this is just a gesture of goodwill without any sort of return, then that's going to be problematic. There are things that are talking about a mechanism and advanced stages. However, based on our previous experience and based on the moves that are coming from Benjamin Netanyahu, there needs to be something concrete to provide security, stability, relief, recovery, healing for the people of Gaza. And that requires a full commitment to end the genocide and follow up with the punishment of the war criminals led by Benjamin Netanyahu and everyone who supported them as well. Without that, there's going to continue to be a risk. Now, even if there is a ceasefire, and even if there is relief and Gaza gets rebuilt and all of that is done, there's still going to be an ongoing problem because there is no core solution. This core solution is something that has been mentioned multiple times in recent months. The fact that all the sides are looking to get an all-out solution. However, again, that all-out solution is not going to happen with Benjamin Netanyahu. It isn't going to happen with Benjamin Netanyahu and the most extreme of the extremes of a government in a country that was established on extremism and supremacy and mass terror and killing. Is Trump going to find the formula? Is he going to make certain moves that will indeed force Netanyahu? That's it? Perhaps. Listen, today, global newspapers, New York Times, some European media too, were talking in a more kind of sympathetic way about Gaza. New York Times, I believe that report was, the Israeli government is no longer an ally. The Israeli government, not Israel. In what appears to be something coordinated. Is this temporary? Is this part of a bigger move? We don't know. But what we do know is that, well, Netanyahu and Israel as a state, they've been shooting themselves in the foot, in the knee, in the elbow, in the lung, and maybe soon in the heart too. But there is prospect. There is prospect. Let's see what happens in the next coming days. Maybe some good news will come, at least finally, to the people of Gaza, which is something that everyone has been waiting for. But in the meantime, there's nothing solid to confirm that indeed a breakthrough is done and over, and that's it. We are about to end it. And of course, in the next few days, we'll be monitoring all of the situation, the statements that are coming from Trump when he visits, because he could have potentially planned for a certain declaration to happen upon his arrival to the region, maybe when he's in Qatar, Saudi, or the UAE. Now, despite the fact that Saudi Arabia told him, don't even talk to us about normalization with Israel, don't even mention the country. That was a prerequisite to his visit. There is still very high likelihood that he's going to mention something to do with Gaza in the region. That's why Witkoff is there, and they're actually sending or planning to send the American Israeli who was just released to Qatar, to Doha, immediately after his release. Why? Because Donald Trump wants to meet him directly, and he wants to show that this is my accomplishment. This is my accomplishment. So interesting things indeed. There are many indications that something might be happening in relation to a ceasefire or something bigger than a ceasefire. However, still no solid confirmation yet.